All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. The Excelsior University Center for Social Justice, the Parent and Family Rope Team, and the Men's Rope Team welcome you to the first of our Living a Connected Dad Life workshop series, in which Brian Anderson, who's here with us, co-founder of Fathering Together, will help us explore the importance of engaged fatherhood, as well as discuss practical guidance on how to strengthen relationships with your children, family, and community. As we begin this conversation, let's take a look at a couple of data on the state of fatherhood in the United States. Just a couple of data. According to the National Fatherhood Initiative, 1 in 4 children in the United States live without their biological father. This absence can have significant consequences, including increased poverty, lower educational attainment, and decreased social emotional well-being. Now, despite these changes, there's reason for optimism. Research shows that involved fathers can have a profoundly positive impact on their children's lives. For example, a study by the National Center for Fathering found that children with involved fathers are more likely to excel academically, exhibit better social behavior, and develop emotional intelligence. However, many dads struggle to balance work and family responsibilities, leading to feelings of guilt, stress, and disconnection. A survey by the Pew Research Center found that 63% of dads say they spend too little time with their children, and 46% report feeling anxious or uncertain about their parenting. As we navigate the complexities of modern fatherhood, it's essential to recognize that being a connected, involved dad is not only beneficial for our children, but also for ourselves. By prioritizing relationships, self-care, and personal growth, we can become more confident, capable, and compassionate fathers. I have the privilege of introducing Brian Anderson, who is a committed husband, dad of 2 daughters, and gender equity advocate. Generally, you will find Brian building something imaginative with Lego bricks, organizing meals, or driving his daughters to soccer and gymnastics. However, somehow he has managed to find the time to write a book called Fathering Together, Living a Connected Dad Life, based on his experiences running Fathering Together, a nonprofit focused on empowering dads to be agents of change in themselves, their families, and their communities. Recently, Fathering Together merged with another nonprofit called All Parents Welcome, and Brian now serves as a director of foundation relations for Inner City Computer Stars, a Chicago-based nonprofit which trains adults on business, leadership, and technology skills to launch careers in tech. For tonight, Brian is here to help us navigate these modern times where technology has the potential to build healthy communication lines between us and our children. So, Brian, thank you so much for being here. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Brian will do a brief presentation and then we'll open it up for conversation.
Great. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll dive in. And can you all see it okay?
Perfectly.
Okay, great. And before we dive in, Amber, I will do my best to talk about boys, but as Daniel just mentioned, I've got 2 daughters, and even being a boy, I'm still confused sometimes when I see my friends' children, and all the things I used to get up to, but we'll get into that. So today, for the presentation piece at least, I want to kind of do some definitions and grounding in terms of what we're going to do tonight. Talk about some strategies that have evolved from the work I've done with dads, and kind of draw from some of the work in things that I've shared in my book, but I've got a host of other books and resources to share as well with y'all tonight. So we'll do a brief lecture, but I really want to get into some Q&A and discussion as to what we can do to really build community, build relationships, and strengthen that bond that we want to have with our children. And to the point, some of the data that Daniel shared, we often talk about absent fathers and the detrimental impact it has on children. And 100% agree with everything, everything that data has shared, and I've used it many times in other workshops and presentations. But what often gets lost, and why I do the work I do, and why we built Fathering Together to do what we did, is really because so many dads are, in the home. They are there. They sleep in their bed with their wives or their partners, um, but they're mentally and emotionally absent. They've got a long job and fall into this narrative and trap, really, of being that breadwinner. And that's how they show their love. That's how they show their connection and involvement in the home. And as I've said to many people before, a child does not care if you close a deal for $7 million. They care if you came to the soccer practice or the baseball game. And so tonight and over the next couple of workshops, I really want to explore how we can be better parents, not just dads, because the skills we're going to be talking about are not gendered skills. We all need to have these skills. And so, as I kind of give another quick intro of who I am before we dive into the meat of all of this, um, I used to do my introductions with my professional skills and experiences first. And then the Legos and the roles I have at home were always the like, Andy has time for these other things, right? To be married and be a dad. But on LinkedIn, I lead. My first tagline is husband, then dad, then all the other jobs that I have. And so when I was, sending an updated bio to you, Daniel, I realized like, no, I need to reverse this, right? Like if I'm going to be talking about how to be an engaged dad and connected with my family, I need to model that in all ways. And so one of the things that I hope that you all get and realize out of this is like, regardless of what those bullet points are for you, if you've got a child at home that looks to you, that's always going to be at the top, whether we want it to be there or not, and whether we are remembering that in the middle of a meeting that's running long, or when you get a call that disrupts your day, but it's the nurse saying, "Hey, you need to come get your kid because they have a fever," right? Like once you have that child, you're stuck, or you're in for the greatest adventure of your life. And so I just want to mention that by way of introduction that with my children and the work that I do with them, with myself, it's all ultimately towards their benefit and the world that I want them to live within and be inherited, right? That we pass on. But tonight we're going to talk about living that connected dad life or parenting life, and some skills that we can get into. But since there's a small group of us, if there are if you want to unmute yourself and share something, feel free to do so, or you can type in the chat. But when you see these two terms, connection and disconnection, what what does that elicit in you? What are some words or experiences that define those terms when I say them? So connection, disconnection. And I'm okay with silence, but I also know we're recording. So, uh, Craig, you came on muted. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry. I like skipped dinner, so I'm like I just went off camera to eat a little.
No, no,
I
that's okay.
mean, I think you're raising a really good point, Brian, which is like this concept of like how do you actually judge whether you are connected to your kids or not? Because I think you can have, and again, personal experience, but like I certainly have had experience like periods where I spent lots of time with my kids, but haven't necessarily felt connected.
Yep.
And then very short bursts of time where it's been super connected, and that's so to me, I think it's, the degree to which you're, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, the degree to which they look to you
Hmm.
for stuff, for guidance, for support. Um, that to me kind of, at least I've always taken that as an indication that I have a connection, or they feel they have a connection with me.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks.
I
Amber,
was gonna say,
oh,
I was gonna
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah.
something similar. The first thing that came to mind was how blurry that line feels, right? And I think it has to do a little bit with what Craig was saying, that sometimes you can be spending time with them or close to them, but disconnected.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can not be with them and feel very connected, right? And even small but big issues like having your phone with you when you're with them and things like those that really affect the level, the depth of the connection that you have.
Right.
And the other one is I think you made a great point, Craig, in terms of not only how connected I feel, but how connected do they feel? And what are the signs of that, right? What are the implications of that? I think that's a very important consideration.
Yeah. Great points, both of you.
Um,
Amber,
so
yeah.
yeah, so I was gonna say for disconnection would be like emotionally unavailable. I know like for me being a single mom, like I was like I had so much going on that it was hard for me to connect emotionally with my kids. It was always like discipline, discipline, discipline. Like I need y'all to do this, I need y'all to do that. So I was never like present in my emotions, like trying to cater to what they need. It was, and so I noticed like now I have to like stop yelling as much and kind of like just talk to them like their people, and just try to get to their level, understand from their level that emotional atonement, like how am I affecting them, and how the way I talk to them, how I treat them. So I feel like I was disconnected in that point. So now in the connection, I do try to have my phone away from me when I'm with them. Now I leave it up high. My son's always like, "Mommy, get off your phone!" Like, so he's only 4. He pays attention to that. So I like try to make sure I'm not on
Yeah.
my phone. If I'm like with them, I lay down on the ground with them. I play with them. Like I'm really physical with them, not just like, in their presence, but like actually interacting with them and asking what they're doing, like just trying to engage in that quality time. Because I know I had like times where I mentally like check out and need to decompress in the middle of like at 6 o'clock. I'm like I'm tired, like I'm scrolling. It gets really bad. So I just try to like be really intentional when it comes to like that disconnect or that connection and realizing where I'm falling short, so I can you know do something about that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. You said you have a 4, how old are your two boys again? You said 4, and what was the other one?
So 4 and 1, they're about to be 2 and 5, and
Okay.
it's interesting.
Yeah. 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 No,
Yeah,
I mean, every age is a great age, right?
yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I love it. Thank you. Um, Anything to add, Kendrick? If not, that's okay.
No, I echo what Amber said,
Cool.
um, being, someone who's have the responsibility that you have with your job, and you come home and you're thinking about a million things that's not pertaining to them, and you can kind of get lost in that world. So just being able to disconnect from that and spend some time with them
Yeah.
can be a struggle. So
Yeah. No, definitely. Um, and so like you've touched on all of these things, right? But like the difference between these two fundamentally is, multifaceted and very can manifest in different ways, right? So with connection, there's the physical, emotional, spiritual connection that can be built there. They're complex, as Amber said, they can be very exhausting, but they also can be very rejuvenating and supporting, depending on, the situation or how extroverted or introverted you are. Um, I was a very extroverted person in my 20s and somewhat into my 30s. And after my children were born, I remember telling my dad, I understand now why you love silence and alone time so much. Because your volume is constantly on full blast, right? And as Amber, as you said, like kids, when they get physical, they have a lot of energy. And that connection is so important to be built. On the other side, though, like disconnection is very isolating. It can be, depressive. It can be very singular in focus, but it can also be an echo chamber, right? Like, in the work I've done with dads, both in ministry kind of capacities and counseling or just coaching, we can all fall into this trap of when we're by ourselves or when we're really just in our own zone, every idea sounds great because it's ourselves, right? We're talking to ourselves and the mirror tells me I'm great. Whereas in a connected lifestyle, in a community, you have multiple perspectives telling you like, great, awesome, or maybe rethink that because you're going down the wrong pike, right? Um, and it's really important that it's not an all or nothing, right? It's not like there's a checklist in a parenting manual that says if you do these 5 or 10 things, you're done for life. You're set, you're perfect, here's your diploma and go retire. It's every day, every hour sometimes there's a reconnecting and a disconnecting. This morning, my daughter, who is on the verge of puberty and has all the wild emotions that come with it, we had a fight, right? Like I misread a situation. I thought she was being playful, but no, she wanted actual bonding time. and got very upset with me. And I apologized, but she wanted space. And so I gave her space. And then literally 10 minutes later, she was laughing at something. I asked her what it was, and we were back to normal. We were off to the races laughing about this silly thing that she saw, right? And so anytime you make a mistake, it's going to happen. But if you can reconnect and rebuild after a mistake, that is so much more important than often the mistake itself. So again, even when we're in this space of disconnection, know that there's a possibility of reconnection right around the corner. Now, to do all this stuff, right? Like we have to have the capacity. So Amber, you were saying like at 6 o'clock, you're exhausted. You just want to scroll and disconnect and be on your phone. I get it. I've been there, but as you also all mentioned, like you can be in the same room with someone and not be connected to them, right? You can be experiencing a TV show, but be on your phone and not give a care as to the character, right? And maybe it's the 10th time you've seen that Pixar or Disney movie, but your kids still want you to watch it without your screen. And so you just kind of sometimes have to grin and bear it. And so how do we build this capacity to be connected, to be engaged as parents before we start doing everything else, right? And part of that is the self-awareness that comes with being a parent. You have to acknowledge like, hey, my life is fundamentally different now. Whether you are living with your children or not, whether you are co-parenting and see your children every so often. A good friend of mine, he's remarried, has a child in his second marriage. He lives on the East Coast, but his wife and boys moved ages ago and live on the West Coast. And so when he has that opportunity to be connected, he takes it, right? But he also has worked really hard now that his boys are in high school to be connected through, WhatsApp, through other media, so that even if they're not physically close to one another, they can build that relationship. And so it took a lot of work because he became a dad at a young age to have that self-awareness. Being flexible and adapting to change, right? Like as I mentioned this morning, in a moment, I was in the doghouse and my daughter hated me. But I gave her some space, let her do her internal work to reset. I did my internal work to reset, and we came back together again. And so I was able to adapt to that change. But also, my second child, my younger daughter, is 180 degrees different from my older one. And so all of the skills, my manual that I crafted for my first daughter didn't apply for my second daughter. And they still don't apply to each other, right? There's moments where I can use the same tricks, but my oldest one, if you tossed her in the air as a child, she would freak out and say, no, no, no. My second daughter would say, higher, you're not throwing me high enough. And so I have the joy of having a very conservative, reserved child and a daredevil that I may never hear from again when she turns 18 because she's going to go off and explore the universe. And that's great. The other piece is we have to find that desire to communicate as a parent. Again, I'm just going to keep going back to Amber because I loved your story, right? Like, there are times where I don't want to deal with anything. I just want to like go into my corner and hide and sleep or read a book or whatever, recharge my batteries. But that's just not always possible with children. And I can hear them now. They just got back from their theater class with my wife and they may make a cameo, but they're going to want to tell me all about that when we get done with this session. And I've had a long, exhausting day. I'm sure you all have had long, exhausting days, but that doesn't matter. I've got to find it in myself to communicate and be present. And then finally, you got to create a plan. And we'll do that tonight too. So all of these things we're going to talk through tonight, but that plan is super important. And we'll get to it in more detail. But as I've said to many people I've coached and worked with, nonprofits, for-profits, any company has a board of directors, right? There's somebody at the top or some group of people at the top giving guidance and strategic direction. But as parents, why can't we have that for ourselves, right? And so throughout my life, I've created a personal board of directors to help me with transition points, to help me process and get through tough scenarios, right? And we'll dive more into that as we get there. So again, before we can do any work, we got to build that capacity in ourselves. And with my book, I use servant leadership as that model. So servant leadership is a business leadership model. It's been around for forever, really, but it really took ownership in the business space in the 1960s when a guy named Robert Greenleaf coined the official term servant leader based on some studies and research and a book by Herman Hesse that he read, and really flipped the leadership model on its head. Instead of having an authoritarian dictator, saying, this is my business, this is how it's going to run, he said, you know what, if I'm going to be a great CEO and get maximum shareholder, value, I need to be serving my staff. I need to be creating opportunities for my staff to grow and develop their skill set so that they do their job to the best of their ability, which makes it that much easier for me as the CEO to tell everybody the great work we're doing. Right. And I learned about this ages ago in college and leadership classes, what have you. But when I became a dad and started talking with dads about what they wanted for their children, how they wanted to engage and develop their family, all of them weren't talking about servant leadership in the official terms that come with different, theories and books that have evolved from that, but they were in spirit being servant leaders for their family. And so I started doing research and didn't find any books. So I said, I guess I'm going to have to write this one. And I did. Now, I talk about 9 practices in my book. We are not going to talk about all 9 tonight. We may not even get to all 9 throughout these 4-part series, but tonight I want to focus on 3, and that is being present, improving our communication, and cultivating this lifelong learning mindset. Lifelong learning mindset. Didn't realize how alliterative it was when I wrote it. Sounded great in my head, but speaking it sometimes can fumble me up. So we're gonna breeze through these, and then we can talk more in depth about them. So being present. We've already kind of started alluding to these, right? But I call it the start and the stopping lists. So what we need to do is stop multitasking. I'm sure some of you are on, devices while you're listening to me, and that's totally fine. I'm often on other calls and meetings, making lists, writing up things when I'm on Zoom calls. But around our children and around meaningful relationships, we have to stop multitasking, right? And we have to stop limiting our beliefs. And by that, I mean, we have to stop telling ourselves we can't be present because of all these other factors, or I can't be the person my child wants or needs because I'm, fill in the blank. There's some sort of no that you're telling yourself. And by telling yourself no, you're preventing engagement, right? You're not able to, like, another example would be at, evening hours, your kid wants to watch a show. They've done all their chores. They've done whatever. They've earned the show. Great. You're exhausted though. And so your limiting belief is I'm too tired to engage. So I'll just let the TV screen, right, be the parent for a while. But maybe that TV show has a life lesson in it that it's going to be great to harken back to and use on your kids later. I do it all the time, especially with Bluey episodes. There's always something that I can pull out of Bluey and remind my children to do their chores or to be a better sister and caring person, right? So when you're limiting your beliefs by saying you're too tired, you're missing those little nuggets of opportunity. And then, as we've already talked about, like, how do we step away from those distractions? Putting our phone down, right? Not having other stuff going on in the background, music playing when your child wants to have a meaningful conversation with you. And what we need to then do is start doing other things, right? We need to start actively listen. We learn all about this in leadership, teamwork workshops, professional development exercises, but we need to do that with our children. We need to get on their level. We need to be eye contact. We need to nod. We need to repeat back, especially like Amber, with little kids. Half the time I couldn't understand my child, right? Especially as they're developing certain consonants and vowel sounds. They might say one thing and you think it's another because, especially like with my younger daughter, she couldn't differentiate between the letter K and the letter T for the longest time. And so she would often say, I want Tate. That could mean cake. That could mean seeing her friend Kate. We had to use a lot of other context clues to get at what she needed. So that comes with active listening. Practicing gratitude is huge too. Not just gratitude of saying, hey, you did a great job today, or thank you for helping me set the table, right? Or doing your chores. Gratitude towards other people is easy, right? We're often taught to do that, but we don't often do that for ourselves. And so how do we take a moment to thank ourselves for what we were able to accomplish, right? Like at the end of the day, do a 5-minute reflection on what was good about your day. What did you do well? And pride yourself on that, right? Like you don't have to like have a cake with big candles every night, but just have some sort of ritual for yourself to say, I did well. And I'm going to acknowledge that. And how then can I do it again tomorrow to keep that positive energy going? And then project manage your life. There's a great book out there, and I'll share resources and things later on at the end as well. But there's a a book called Fair Play by a woman, Eve Brodsky. She found that she and her husband were very unequal at home. Her laundry list was, or her to-do list was full, where he often had free time. And so she started looking into how do families balance the workload? How do families not have 5 people doing the same task when only one person needs to do it? Almost exactly like how workplaces are, right? You don't have 2 managers with the same deliverable. You have one manager with multiple deliverables. You have people that do specific tasks, and your job description says so. But at home, we throw a lot of that out the window. And so she created this game, a deck of cards with all the things that a family needs to do to get through the day. Some of the kids can take care of, some of the parents, can take care of. But she started project managing her life and her family in a way that allowed them all to be present and engaged throughout the day, rather than one person constantly working to make sure everybody else was happy. Because when that happens, you burn out and nobody's happy, right? The other piece is improving our communication. And we'll come back to these after the lecture, but for the sake of the recording, I'll just finish this up. Improving communication means practicing empathy, putting yourselves in the other person's shoes, right? Recognizing what they're trying to tell you. We often talk about intent versus impact, right? Like what we intend by our language, but how it's being impacted on others and received by others. And so we can't communicate if we're not able to have some empathy and see where the other person is coming from in that dialogue. And this is huge in a very polarized cultural society that we have right now, right? Where we have these echo chambers of social media telling us what we want to hear when we're not engaging with people across difference and learning how to navigate this world around us. Because if we're afraid to confront difference and challenging uncomfortable spaces, how can our children do that, right? How can we be teaching our children to stand up or engage when we aren't doing that ourselves? And so how do we practice empathy? How do we not let our emotions run away when with our behavior? All of those are critical. Starting with a common interest. So I've done a lot of ministry work, interfaith dialogue, difficult conversations, you name it. And we always love to point out differences, right? And that has its place, right? And it's part of a developmental stage that children go through, especially when it comes to genitalia and boys and girls and all sorts of fun conversations we get to have. But there's so much more that we have in common. And some of the people that I've engaged with through the work at Fathering Together, I would never want to talk to. I would see them on the street and probably turn and go the other direction because they looked scary or they wore something that I was afraid of. But some of the people that looked that way and I engaged through virtual conversations, through Zoom calls and conversations like we're doing tonight, they would start to talk about their children and how much they love their children and what they would do for their children. And I'm like, man, if we aren't the exact same person after all, right? We had this bond over our shared vision for what we wanted in our children. We had different ways of exploring it, different interests and hobbies to get us there, but fundamentally, as 2 dads engaging, we put aside all of these other things that made us different for the sake of learning how to be better dads. And if I hadn't done Fathering Together and put myself through all that stress to running a nonprofit, I wouldn't have had these amazing experiences with these people, these dads all around me. Last thing I'll say is respond, don't react, right? Our children are great at reacting. For all of us with teenagers, we know this very well. All of us with, children who are in their first few years of life, they love to react, right? They are big and explosive and get angry or get happy. You can read them like a book. And if we react the exact same way, it goes nowhere. We're the people, right? We're the people with years of experience. So how do we engage them in a meaningful way that is developmental, right? And then lifelong learning. These are all attempts of mine at doing crazy things that got me out of my comfort zone, and including painting my daughter's bedroom with her, and watching her drop paint on things that I didn't want paint on, including our bodies, and then turning it into a game and having fun because I had to let it go, right? Like you can't be a perfectionist all the time. And so I learned to get comfortable in the discomfort. I learned to say yes and, right? If anybody's seen an improv show, the key to improv is saying yes to a situation. How do you say yes to your children instead of just saying no, right? There's that movie Yes Day. We've never done that in my house. I don't know if we ever will. But what happens when you say yes, right? Creative, inventive ideas come into being. The other piece, though, as I said earlier, like in disconnection, we're in an echo chamber. But when you're learning and reading all the time, and not just blogs, but engaging in deep, thoughtful readings, great things can happen. So how do you start to get curious? Surround yourself with folks who are also learning and on this journey and exploring, and ultimately letting your kids take the lead. Daniel mentioned I build Legos with my daughters, and a lot of the Legos we have are the ones I had when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. My parents kept them, including the instruction manuals. And so we've rebuilt Legos together, and it's been a blast to watch them and learn how to play Legos again through their eyes. But if I had closed off, if I had stopped myself because I was too tired, I wouldn't be there, and we wouldn't have the relationship we have. So we'll come back to this in a discussion, but the question I have for you all is, based on these 3 skills, which one looks easiest, feels easiest? Oh, that's a slam dunk, I can do that. Which one's going to be the hardest? And how can we build some support? We'll come back to that. I'll let y'all think about it. But for the sake of the recording and where we're going to get to is, how are we going to create an action plan around one of these skills tonight? And not just saying like, well, I'm just going to practice, but really get tactile and strategic, right? Smart goals. How do we measure our growth and success like we would in the business place? How can we project manage our life and set some goals around the engagement we want with our children? What are the actions we can take today, tomorrow, ongoing? And ultimately then, who's this accountability group that will help us get there? We can count in this room, happy to stay connected, but also, who are those people that you can trust and rely on? And I'll share these and everything, but these are ways that folks, if you're listening on the recording, you can get in touch with me. Happy to stay connected. And as I've said, the best dad manual is the one you co-create with your kids. And that means every kid gets 1, maybe 2 manuals in their lifetime. And you rewrite them every step of the way. Because I've read every book you can think of. I even wrote one, but that doesn't matter if you can't get your kids to invest in it too. So we can pause the recording here. I'll stop sharing my screen, but for the remainder of the time we have today, I really want us to dive into these 3 questions, however long it takes us, and help start building that action plan together.